Welcome everyone to our last session of the day, Preparing for Senior Leadership. I hope you enjoyed our networking session before. I know I did, and you will enjoy this as well. I'm Sylvia Perez-Cash, the Senior Vice President of Operations at HACR. I'm excited to introduce this session where we will learn how to put sponsorship and mentorship into action as you prepare for senior positions. As we've heard today, and as you will hear tomorrow, these are two components to success in our careers. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize our session sponsors, Prudential Financial and UPS. Thank you to both Prudential and UPS for your commitment to HACR and to Hispanic inclusion. And now I would like to introduce the first panelist of today's session, Fabiola Torres. Fabiola Torres is the Chief Marketing Officer and Senior Vice President of Energy at PepsiCo. She has some wonderful insights to share about sponsorship and mentorship in her own journey toward executive leadership. Faby, thank you for joining us today at the start of this panel.
Thank you for having me. So I'm super excited to be here and share some thoughts. This is a journey, right? So like to just have a conversation with you guys, and happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, that's exactly what we're aiming for. So if you would first introduce yourself a little bit, help us understand a little bit about you and how you came to your position. What was your career path?
It's been a non-stop journey, I would say. I'm born and raised in Mexico. I started my career in my country after college in beverages. Soon after that, I moved to Nike and have several managerial positions, and I started from a manager all the way to being the head of different categories at Nike Global. And then I moved to Apple for 3 years as the head of marketing for Beats by Dre, and it's been 18 months since I took this job. So it's been a very, very good journey. I think I'm proud of where I am today, and definitely every learning through my career has been a stepping stone, I would say, is into what will be next for me. It is really important for me to think about when you come in as a diverse talent, I would say, as a diverse leader, and sometimes you have to work harder, right? Sometimes you have to be able to overcompensate a few things, whether it's the language, your accent, or your background. But that's who I am, and I embrace it every day, and I'm super proud of who I am. And that's in a nutshell Faby Torres, who is happy to share some thoughts today.
Wonderful, thank you. And I appreciate the authenticity in that story right then and there, right? Like, this is who you are, and embracing the challenges as well as the advantages, right, of diverse talent. So you commented in your journey a number of different steps, and this is what we're trying to talk about today, and the rest of the panel will speak about after our part. What is the role, we know there's a role of sponsorship and mentorship in all of our career journeys. Before we get into how it impacted yours, could you briefly, for the sake of the audience, describe how you define sponsorship versus mentorship? How are they different, and what purpose do they serve?
I think in my own experience, and the way that I play the role as a mentor today as well, is mentorship for me is you have to have someone to go to every day. And when you need it in the ups and downs in your journey, for whether it's for big projects, for big moves in your career, for your day-to-day job, for being coach, I would say, and how to maneuver the organizations where you are in, that's mentorship. That's your companion, your ally, your coach. Sponsorship is when you get someone that you aspire to be. You aspire to be part of that team. You aspire to be, or someone that can actually help you to get the job that you want within a specific agenda. That I think throughout your career, you need both. If you ask me what it has helped me to be where I am, it's a mentorship. I think it has bigger weight throughout your career to have a mentor where you can trust and they can guide you, they can coach you, but they can actually tell you the truth about sometimes when you don't do right or when you have opportunities, and then find the sponsors throughout in the moments where you feel like you're ready and you're sharp enough and you put yourself out there to help you to grow and help you to have bigger visibility. I don't know if I answered your question correctly, but I hope I was clear on differentiating one versus the other.
There is no correct answer. That's what we're looking for, that differentiation and that personalization of those definitions, because it's what those roles have meant to you that we're really trying to capture today. So thank you. So I want to dive in specifically on one of the pieces that you mentioned, and that is, putting yourself out there, and that you're finding the sponsor of the moment that responds to the opportunity of the moment, whatever you're judging or trying to aspire to at that time. The importance of putting yourself out there, another word I would use to describe it, another phrase would be the social capital, the importance of developing that social capital in your workplace and within the leadership of your company, as you develop, as you aspire for those executive leadership positions. Could you speak to the importance of social capital, and particularly why it's so important for executive leadership positions to be in the pipeline for those roles versus other managerial and leadership positions?
I think is you represent your own brand. I will start from there. And the way that you put yourself out there every day, how you show up, your presence, your delivery, your results. But first is how you show up, as I said it at the beginning. And second is how you show up, I would say. We have to be consistent. Is how you are professionally and personally. In the world of social media today, in the world of everything is like out there for your, as a professional, as a persona as well, you have to make sure that they understand the whole package. And I think that the importance of social capital today is bigger and deeper than any other time in the last few decades because of the how you show up, but how are you true to yourself in that presence that you double click on that. And I can give you an example of things that you have opportunities to be part of something bigger when you're ready to it. If you don't feel like you're ready, prepare yourself for that moment and be out there and be ready. You don't have to just spend a lot of time on behind the scenes to prep if you don't put yourself out there. It happens a little bit on parallel. When you actually are exposed to different people in the organization where you belong, when you actually raise your hand and they see you consistently there, you're going to get a chance, and you're going to get a chance, and you have to be ready for that moment. It could happen today, it could happen in 6 months, it could happen in 2 years. That's the part.
Wonderful. Well, this has been wonderful. There's lots in your just these brief comments that I hope that the rest of the panel can integrate into and can spur the thought of the rest of the discussion that we're having today. So Faby, I'm so glad that you were able to make it with us today in this way. Really appreciate your time and reflection. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And now I would like to introduce, as we move on to the rest of the panel, I'd like to introduce today's moderator for our discussion, Frank Carbajal. Frank Carbajal is the founder of Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, STMPO LLC. Welcome, Frank. Thank you for joining us today.
Before I introduce Ernie Ceberio, I'd like to say how honored I am to act as your moderator today in the Senior Leadership Pipeline. And why is it important to me to moderate? Well, I'm a dear friend of Sid Wilson, your president and CEO, and I'd like to thank the entire staff at ASED for putting together a wonderful virtual event. I met Sid in 2006 when I had asked him to write an endorsement for my book, Building the Latino Future, Success Stories for the Next Generation. And when I think of the next generation, I think of our topic today, senior leadership. And how do we get there? Well, today we will provide most of those answers. And if you still have questions, our wonderful leaders are accessible. So I'd like to start off with Ernie Ceberio. Ernie, welcome to today's panel.
Hi, Frank. Great to be with you and great to be participating in today's HACR Leadership panel.
Ernie, please share with us your journey, trajectory to where you're at today so folks could get to know a little bit about yourself. Introduce your background, introduce your work profession, everything that's all exciting about Ernie.
Sure. Thank you, Frank. So before I get started with the professional piece, I think I'll just start with my personal background. My parents immigrated from Cuba to the United States in the late 60s. I was born in New York City. Soon thereafter, I grew up in New York City for about 10 years until we moved to northern New Jersey, Union City, New Jersey, specifically, where my parents could buy their first home. My parents didn't have a lot of formal education, so they had good union jobs. They valued education. I went through Catholic school, K through 12, before going to college. So I wound up at a Northeastern Liberal Arts College by chance, through the connection of someone in the grade before me in high school having gone there. I'd never heard of Vassar College until I arrived there in the early 90s. And there was a process of discovery, learning about myself and what I like to do, what I was good at, learning to navigate a completely new environment. Many of my classmates, this was not their first time in college. I'm the first in my family to attend. Many had been successive generations of college attendance. I majored in political science and economics. I graduated from college and took a couple years off and worked in New York City government through Urban Fellowship. And then I applied to law school, where I attended UC Berkeley in Northern California. After going to Berkeley, I returned to New York and I started in private practice at Weill Gotshal in New York City. And that's really where the professional journey really began. I never grew up thinking I was going to be a lawyer. I had no lawyers that I could talk to in my family. I didn't know a lot of lawyers. But through my experiences in college, working, I did see a lot of lawyers in a lot of different types of roles. Some were actually practicing law, some were running organizations, some were doing completely different things. And I said, okay, I think I could get my law degree and then figure it out as I went along. And, we'll see where I end up. Fast forward about 20 years later, after being at the firm for about 6 years, I went to go work at Prudential in their real estate investment management business, which I'm currently working in today, but I've not worked here for the entire time. I started in a sort of individual role, supporting private funds in the US and in the UK. Over time, I wound up doing lots of different things, even though my job didn't necessarily technically change. I sort of started new business lines, both in the US and the UK. A couple of years after starting at Prudential, they said, would you like to lead our international legal function? Get on and I said, okay, great. What does that mean? And I said, they said, get on a plane and go meet people.
Right.
So I had a team based in Mexico City, London, Munich, Germany, Singapore, Tokyo, and in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates. And I would have expected this Cuban guy would be in the UAE, but I did get to visit there and spend a lot of time in all these different places, working in different environments, getting to learn about different cultures. And then my daughter was born while I was doing that role, and she was a toddler, not even a toddler, she was an infant, and I was effectively FaceTiming with her from the Middle East. And I said, I don't really want to do this while my daughter is growing up. I want to be closer to home. So I switched to another leadership role in our retirement business, which was completely different. I didn't have subject matter expertise, but I figured I could learn it on the job. And then I did that for 3 years. And then I came back into the current role that I have now, which is the real estate investment management business, leading the US and Latin America businesses on the legal side. So, it was really a journey of being open-minded, right? If I had to characterize it, being curious, being willing to experiment, maybe take some risks and sort of step into the unknown, to where I am today on my professional journey, which I think has a long runway left, but it's been an interesting ride so far.
Well, that's excellent. And you mentioned, the pivot of leaving where you felt much more needed at home, and you found a position that was on the trajectory of a senior leader. And for that, there are many folks listening at the level of mid-level managers. And how do we increase the visibility within a company to attract the attention of potential sponsors?
Yeah.
And, one thing, Ernie, is it's great that you and Faby and Dan have that experience. What is your experience, and what do you advise for our folks listening?
Yeah, what I would say there, Frank, is that no matter what your job is, I'm a lawyer, Dan's in an accounting firm, Faby is in a consumer goods company, but every time you show up to work and interact with people is an opportunity to attract a sponsor. People will see your work. If you do a good job, you might get noticed. You may not realize you're being noticed while you're doing that. Oftentimes in the legal world, right, if you're negotiating a transaction, your next client could be the person you're negotiating against on the other side if they're impressed with you. And that's happened to people that I've known over the years. Or that person could be your next place of employment. They might want to offer you a job. So I would say, in your day-to-day job, in your day-to-day role, there's an opportunity there to attract a sponsor by the quality of your work. But I think that's only part of it. I think you can go, if you want to grow as a leader, you want to progress and be upwardly mobile in your organization, you have to be committed to doing that and learn what works for you in terms of your journey, right? What does it take to grow within your company, within your industry, within your function? It really does take work. It takes planning. It takes strategy to do that. So for a couple of examples that I could share from my own experience, I've been lucky or fortunate that I've had people that I've worked for and with who have both been mentors and sponsors in my career. Mentors in the sense that they've been willing to give me advice about, well, this, Ernie, is the type of experience you need to get, or you're missing this, or you should get that, or you should get to know X, Y, or Z person. Or sponsors where, unbeknownst to me, they're in other rooms saying, what about Ernie for this opportunity? Have we thought about him for that role? So I think you have to think about, you have to want it, right? If I always sort of chuckle to myself when I see very successful senior leaders say, well, and they get asked the question, how did you get to be CEO of Fortune 50 company? And they make it seem like they just got dropped out of a helicopter one day. No, that's not how it works. People work very hard and they plan and they build relationships to get to where they are.
We have a few minutes left, but I like what you said about building relationships. Networking is one thing, but building relationships in terms of sustainability is something that's long-term. And you hit on something that many of our listeners and guests are are relating to what you said about your parents and as immigrants and my parents as immigrants, and that mentorship pipeline. We necessarily didn't have it at a young age because our parents made all the sacrifices to make sure that we were first generation graduates from college and first generation professionals. So who were some of your mentors? Name one mentor that really helped elevate your career. And, we talk about sponsorship, but a mentor.
Yeah, I mean, I think the person that I started working for at Prudential, my first boss, her name was Kathy. She, I worked directly for her initially. She went on to other roles, but every step along the way, she was a sounding board, a mentor, giving me advice. I always knew that I could have a relationship of confidence and trust with her.
Yeah.
That she always had my best interest at heart, even if I may not have disagreed with everything she was telling me, which is sometimes can happen, right? You're not always going to agree with what people tell you. But I knew that when she was in other rooms, she had me in mind, that was looking out for me for opportunities. So I think that was something I went to Prudential. I started working for this person, and she wound up being a mentor, a sponsor, and a friend. And I would say that sometimes that doesn't happen for everyone. So I would just encourage people that if you're in a relationship with a supervisor where the supervisor is not supportive of you and your growth, or they are threatened by you, you have to maybe make a change sometimes, which is often difficult. You can't, the part of at least my experience as a first generation person, not being initially familiar with networking and how you kind of move in these organizations, sometimes there's an inherent reticence to ask people for advice or to ask people for their time. And I find that most people, if you do it in the spirit of wanting to learn or get to build a relationship, that most people are willing to help you or try to, or at least give you some of their time. But I think sometimes we hold back because it's like, well, if we just put our head down and work, we'll be recognized. I think that's certainly part of it, and fundamental and basic. You have to be good at what you do, but also there's that other piece of putting yourself out there a little bit, being a little vulnerable sometimes, and asking for advice and for help when you're not exactly sure what to do.
Exactly. And then wrapping up, I think you hit a key element of what we need to remove in terms of moving forward and upward is letting go of pride. I think culturally we have so much pride that we're afraid to ask those questions. And I think we have to ask those difficult questions. So lastly, what is one difficult question you provide folks that are in the audience to ask? What is one question that you would ask?
That's an interesting question. I think people need to be honest with themselves and ask themselves, what do they really want to do?
Yes.
Do they really aspire to that senior level position, which is 24/7, high stress, high reward, economic and otherwise? Or do they not really aspire to that? They maybe aspire to something in leadership, but maybe that a little less, something a little different. And I think that's okay. Everybody, as I shared before, there was a time in my life where I did not want a job where I was traveling a lot internationally for personal reasons. And I made a decision to do something different. And, for every time in life, a season, if I get the phrase correct, you have to know yourself and ask yourself and be very honest with yourself. And that can sometimes be difficult because you think, well, my parents want me to do this, or I should be doing that. If you're saying I should be doing this, that's probably not the right question, or maybe that's not the right answer. So anyway, that's the one question I would ask people, to be honest with themselves. And what do they really want to do? Where do they want to get to? And what are they willing to get there? What are they willing to do to get there?
That is awesome. Full transparency from what I hear as far as that reciprocal relationship. And we have great discussion, and I appreciate also the Halloween spirit. For me, my spirit behind me is literally a spirit of celebrating both my parents who had passed a few years back. And, I really enjoyed you starting the conversation with your parents' journey, because we all are in this together. And I thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Frank, for your questions. And it was great speaking with you. And thank you to HACR for inviting me.
Thank you. It's a wonderful day for HACR Leadership, Senior Leadership. We have another amazing guest. You heard from Faby and Ernie. And before I introduce Daniel Chavez, he also goes by Dan, I'd like to say how important it is for understanding and identifying sponsorship and mentorship. You know, when I created the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit in 2010, and as it goes, it's about really building those relationships. And with that in mind, I'd like to bring in Daniel Chavez so that we could touch more on building relationships and sponsorship levels. Daniel Chavez, welcome to HACR. It's so great to have you.
Thanks, Frank. Great to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and welcome to everyone to today's session.
Daniel, I'd like to know a little bit about, and especially our audience, your trajectory and how, you know, upward mobility, it always starts with, you know, the beginnings of your journey. And please share with our participants, our audience, your journey to your professional success.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, one of the funny things, people are always pretty eager to talk about themselves. So this is probably the easier part of today's discussion. I was born actually in Japan. My dad was in the Air Force. Born in Japan to Mexican father. My mother is German and Irish, and moved back to the U.S. when I was just a baby. Unfortunately, my parents were divorced young, but I think that actually helped me become a little bit more independent earlier, maybe than I would have otherwise. Raised by a single mother who had her own battles along the way, sustained persistent mental illness, a lot of things that people deal with still today. And I was very aware of that as a child. The upside of that is that I was raised, in addition to by my mother, I often say I was raised by a pack of women. So both of my parents grew up in the St. Louis area of the U.S. My dad's Mexican sisters rallied around me, particularly one aunt, Aunt Anita. My mom was also one of three, also women. So my family really rallied around me and helped me become the person that I am today. Had a lot of independence as a child, leaned on that family network. And through school, I went to 6 or 7 different schools from kindergarten through high school, including over in Italy for a while. And it's a lot of that variety throughout my childhood built up a bit of resilience, helped me learn how to adapt in different places, and frankly, helped me appreciate the perspectives of other people and see all humans as humans at their core, and not anything about their outside appearance per se. So I put a lot of emphasis on that in helping me develop into the person that I am today. Through college, through professional life, I was also really fortunate to have lived in Costa Rica for a while, lived in the UK for a few years, and that additional international experience really helped me have an appreciation for the value in being adaptable, the value of being kind, and the value of taking ownership for your own development. If you see a problem, if you think you can do something about it, go do it. Go do it. Don't wait. Who else is going to do it? You might as well do it. So that's sort of my personal journey. Professionally, I've been with PwC. I'm a partner at PwC, and I've been here my entire career. Very fortunate to have landed a job with PwC, and now spend 100% of my time serving clients in the renewable energy industry and the utilities industry. In addition to that, I have the great fortune of being the leader of PwC's Latino Inclusion Network across the U.S. So perhaps a little bit more than you were looking for, but I think that those early personal days, as I've reflected, and a lot of Latinos share some of that challenge as we persevered through our childhood, through our high school, through our college. There is tremendous value in that inherent within a lot of us, and I just encourage everyone to recognize those assets.
That is so important to inherit that. And speaking of that, I'd like to ask you a question that's very important for folks to know in terms of what I mentioned about the building of relationships and really putting yourself out there. How can sponsor help you build your social capital, and why is that important when advancing an executive leadership role?
Yeah. So sponsorship, as we've talked about, is a lot about actually helping. Different than providing advice. A sponsor helps you. So in terms of building your social capital or building your social network, your sponsor can pull you along. It's not about just mentioning your name per se, which is also a sponsorship, but they can pull you along if they're going to a meeting, if they're going to an event. They can invite you. They can bring you to those interactions. If you can't go, they can drop your name, right? They can get you in the discussion. And the reason that social capital matters is it opens doors. It opens doors. I had a high school teacher. I'll never forget my junior year high school psychology teacher, Mr. Ebert, and he introduced this concept of the door opener. A sponsor can be a door opener. A sponsor can also give you a little nudge and push you through the door, which you need every once in a while. But that door opener is a concept that really, in this instance, is about social capital. The reason that matters as you're trying to accelerate or climb through the ranks is that as people are making hiring decisions, as people are figuring out who they want on their teams, they generally have an idea of the skills that might be helpful, of the attributes that might be helpful, but they also already have a sense of who can I ask for this? And if your mind is if your name is in the mind of someone who's already in executive leadership and is making decisions about who to pull in to XYZ team or who do they want in this role, it's all the more likely that you'll get there. So that social network from your sponsor, particularly with other executives, is incredibly important because those executives are looking for people who can help achieve their outcomes. The executives themselves don't get it done. They need people to get it done. And you need to be one of the people that comes to mind when they're thinking about that. So that's a helpful way to think about social capital.
Yeah, one thing that you touched on is very key here, as many participants and folks being first generation graduates. You mentioned teachers and mentors having that open door policy where things are transparent as far as not. In our conversation earlier with Ernie, I said some of the things that are so important is leaving that pride aside and really stepping up to a question that is uncomfortable and challenging. But on the other side, that's what a sponsor wants to hear. They want to hear you take that challenge and feel uncomfortable and really approach, because at the end of the day, it's all about building that relationship. And who are some of your mentors, folks that helped you with your trajectory of your career and elevating your role as a partner? Yeah.
So even going back to childhood, I mentioned I was raised by a pack of women. That pack is one of my mentors. I think about
Could I say something real quick? By the way, you had mentioned your tia, your aunt.
Yeah.
And yesterday was Latinas Equal Pay Day on October 21st.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is so important is really celebrating the women raised us. And so I'm glad you mentioned your tia, your aunt. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Aunt Anita. We call her Pretty Nita. And every time you see her, she gives you a big kiss on your cheek, and then you have lipstick on your cheek for the whole rest of the day. My son, Clark, now loves seeing Pretty Nita. He doesn't like the lipstick, though. So you asked about, getting back to it, you asked about my mentors or my sponsors along the way. I also have an uncle. His name is Jim Castellano. He's a successful CPA. He's retired now. He was, for me, the person that I looked up to as a child, and followed his path. I didn't know what I was getting into being a CPA, but I said, hey, Uncle Jim did all right, so I might as well follow that path. He's one within the walls of where I've been professionally at PwC and throughout my career. A few partners have really been instrumental in that. One, his name is Robert, and he's a partner. He's a more senior partner than I am. Really showed me what strong leadership is all about. He's a bit smoother than I am and can deliver messages a little bit more delicately than I can today. I'm working on that. He was incredibly instrumental, and he would pull me along into meetings. He would pull me along into discussions, and then we would talk about it after those discussions. Hey, how'd you do? You could have done this a little bit better. And I would ask him. An incredibly important part of sponsorship is you as the sponsoree or the mentee being able to ask, how did I do? And getting honest feedback in that. And Robert was always incredibly honest in that regard. Another, her name is Maria Motz, Maria Castañón Motz. She now runs PwC's Center for Corporate Governance. And we're not the closest. I don't call her weekly. I don't call her monthly. But when I do call her, she picks up. She answers honestly. She answers with the utmost care. And that care you can feel when you talk to her.
Yeah.
You can feel when you pick up the phone. And I'm a firm believer in caring about the person, the individual, whatever your profession is. If you care about the person over the long term, you're going to be much more successful than if you care about the transaction. Caring about those humans, the people on the other side of the screen, in this instance, of the phone, or the person whose hand you shake. At the end of the day, we're all humans, and Maria and Robert both help me keep my eye on that every single day.
And before we close out, I really am touched by that because there are people that really care about us, and caring about others. It's all reciprocal. It has to be that relationship that is built with that heart, the corazón, as we say in Spanish. And two people who cared for me early on in my career. One was a previous CEO of HACR, Carlos Horta, and today's CEO, Sid Wilson. What they do is they see something in us. And I want folks in the audience listening to see something in you that they see in themselves. So with that and closing, what is the one leadership trait that you possess that is not a secret sauce, but that you could spread these seeds to others listening today?
Yeah, I think we touched on it. I think it's fundamentally caring about the other person. You can learn many other traits, many other skills, whatever your craft is. You can learn that. You can learn to manage projects. A caring person, I believe, is today incredibly relevant. I believe as we move on and we become, unfortunately, more transactional as a society, I think that caring element of things is something that we as humanity are going to need more. As business institutions continue to be the most trusted institutions that exist in our societies, those business leaders need to have their eyes on caring about the people. So caring about each other, caring about humans, that for me, it's not a secret sauce, but if you bring it every single day, it's differentiating, and it'll help us all of us. It'll help us all rise to the occasion as a society.
Dan, you said it great, and you said something earlier today that is being very much touched on as far as how we need to be transparent in terms of mental health, and caring really cuts through all of that, because what it allows us to do is be vulnerable, because being vulnerable is a leadership skill that is within all of us. We have to show that we want to grow, and we all grow together. And I thank you so much, Dan Chavez. This was amazing, excellent. And I also would like to thank the folks that helped put this together. I said, with Stephanie and Brianna and Sid Wilson and Yair Vargas. I really appreciate your time today, Dan.
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank. And thank you to Sid and the team at HACR as well. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And have a blessed day. Thank you.
Faby, Ernie, Thank you, Frank, Faby, Ernie, and Daniel for this great conversation and for sharing your insights into ways to leverage support networks, self-awareness, and personal experiences to prepare yourself for senior leadership positions. Leadership is, at its core, a connection between people, which we have heard throughout today's conversations. And I'd like to thank our session sponsors again, Prudential Financial and UPS. Thank you for your commitment to HACR and your support and investment in Hispanic inclusion. This session wraps up our first day of the Leadership Pipeline Program Conference. I am looking forward to our second day together tomorrow, and I hope you are as well. You can expect more dynamic explorations of meaningful leadership development practices, engaged networking, and your chance to win a new laptop. You heard that right. Remember to share your takeaways from the day on social media using the hashtag HACRLPP21. Don't forget, it's by using this official hashtag HACRLPP21 that you could win the new Dell laptop. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and have a wonderful evening. Take care.